Warm welcome to everybody. We are so pleased that you could join us. Thank you very much. We appreciate that it's not always easy to join a webinar. You have a busy schedule, and so we are really pleased that you're with us. And we're happy particularly to be continuing our webinar series today. Just to remind you, this is our 10th anniversary year, and we're running webinars right the way through the year. The webinars in particular are a great way for us to be able to bring a kind of global perspective to the whole question of being a carer. And that's very important to us. And it's particularly important to us that we bring to your attention how we are working with carers in low and middle income countries. The purpose of this webinar is, in this session, we are focusing on the extremely important issue of the mental health and well-being of unpaid family carers. And it's with great pleasure that we introduce our speakers today. So I want to first of all introduce you to Nicole Dauz, who is from Canada, a carer herself. She has a 14-year-old daughter who has autism and a rare genetic condition, and she offers a caregiver transformation program, which I'm sure she'll refer to, and is, as she says herself, on a mission to help caregivers enjoy their journey. And then we have Bhavana Issar, CEO and founder of Caregiver Saathi, an initiative in India to support caregivers to improve the quality of their lives, their well-being, and the lives of those they care for. She has experience of caring for her father. We welcome Roksana, who is a carer that we'll be seeing on video. Roksana cares for her 13-year-old son who has a cerebral palsy and a learning disability. She lives on the outskirts of Dhaka in Bangladesh, and she's one of the participants in our project with local organization, the Center for Disability and Development. She'll tell us about her experience of providing barefoot counselling to other carers. We have a warm welcome for our founder, Anil Patil. Anil would be very fed up if I didn't welcome him as well. And he is going to be intimately involved in the webinar today, because he'll be conducting a fireside chat with Nicole and with Bhavana. So I think that's it. I'm the ambassador of the organization and its first chair, and my job is to do the introductions and to make sure that things go well, and then to get out of the way. So I'm going to be doing that, but just before we do, I wanted to introduce you to an exciting new innovation that we have, which is a poll. So it would be great now if we could, with Ruth and Michelle, who are working behind the scenes for us, if we could have the poll, and if you'd be kind enough to very quickly fill it in, and then we will continue with the work. And we'll give you the response to this a little bit later on. So if you have all finished the poll, I would now like to hand over to you, Anil, to start the fireside chat. Thank you very much. If you can't see the poll, Suzanne, don't worry too much. We think that most people will have seen it. Anil, over to you.
Thank you, Chris, and thanks for your introduction and warm welcome to the speaker. And also, may I also take the opportunity to welcome you and facilitating today's session. Really appreciate. So let me straight away dwell into that question. So let me ask Bhavana, can you just share your thoughts on what do you mean by mental well-being, Bhavana, and why it is so important? Why should everyone be thinking about it?
First off, heartiest congratulations for the incredible amount of work that Carers Worldwide has done and this series of webinars. Thank you for having me. And I do believe that, our overall well-being has many dimensions. There is certainly an element of the physical effort that goes into caregiving, but there is also many other elements. And a big part is the the amount of mental load that caregiving over a long period of time could mean. So because this is work that could cause stress, and because stress that is unaddressed over a long period of time can create even chronic illnesses, it is absolutely essential that we recognize the mental component of this work and therefore the mental well-being of somebody who does work like caregiving, which is 24/7. And, it's just, there is sometimes no light at the end of the tunnel. And mental well-being is also pivotal because I strongly believe that sometimes we can challenge the boundaries of our imagination and our bodies if only we can have healthy mental well-being. I could go on and on,
Yeah,
but I'm going to
thank
stop
you.
here.
No, wonderful, Bhavana. Thank you so much. If I can ask the same to Nicole, can you just share your thoughts on why mental well-being is so important and why should everyone be thinking about it? And what is it about this whole mental well-being?
Yes, thank you. So for me, I was reading yesterday and came across the word nurturing, and I thought, oh, I love that word, and thought how applicable for today, the ability to nurture ourselves. And so for me, mental well-being, just our overall well-being is any activity, anytime we are able to do something that makes us feel good. And I believe when we start there, it allows us to look at it in a different lens. So often we're being told about what we should be doing and improving our mental health, and it can feel very heavy and something almost that we may not be able to control. But when we step back and say, I am in control, I am the only one actually responsible. So Nicole is the only person responsible for me. And so I can say, well, let's start small. My well-being is something that I'm going to focus on every day, even if it's a small amount of time. As a caregiver, I appreciate it can be very frustrating for fellow caregivers to hear that, but it is so important because when I take time to do something that makes me feel better, then that changes my energy. And my daughter is my greatest teacher. And what I have found is that the more I focus on my well-being and the more I'm able to gift myself with moments of joy and activity as simple as going out for a walk, where people are like, that's your well-being? Yes, because it makes me feel better. For other people, it's knitting. Other people, it's gardening. That allows me to then be more present with my daughter, and she reflects that back to me. So that is what I'm learning, and that's why it's so important. Why all caregivers should take the time to take care of themselves.
Thank you so much, Nicole. I think that word nurture is so important, and everybody should be thinking about it. In fact, before we set up Carers Worldwide, we were thinking about the name for this organization itself is Nurture International. Unfortunately, someone has registered that, so we couldn't take that one. So it's absolutely crucial that nurturing. So before I go to the next question, I would like to just to say to all the participants on this virtual platform, there is going to be a question and answer session at the end of our fireside chat. Please feel free to write your questions in the chat box, and Ruth is collating those questions and feeding back to Chris. If I can stay with you, Nicole, can you just share some of the challenges to the mental health and well-being of carers?
Yes, ironically, it's the stories we tell ourselves. You know, at the beginning of my caregiver journey, I thought that my mind, like, it's my mind, of course it has my best interests at heart. And then I soon realized, oh no, it's my mind who's telling me I don't have time, that I'm not worthy, that I'm selfish, that I should be devoting all of my time to take care of my daughter and my son. And that is why I start with self-care is anything that brings you joy. Your well-being is any activity that makes you feel good. And for me, that allows people to remove the barriers. So something as simple as gratitude, being grateful for waking up. And I know I've had people roll their eyes when I say that, but I have a dear friend who passed away from cancer 3 weeks ago and left behind an 11-year-old daughter. I know that he would have been very grateful for another day of waking up. And so I just share that to remind us that we are in control and we get to choose. It's important that we remind ourselves that our well-being, our happiness is in fact the best gift we can give to our loved one and to everybody in our circle, because we are more than a caregiver. We are a child, a friend, in some instances an employee, a volunteer, a member of a community. And when we can believe that we're worthy of moments of joy, that we're worthy of taking care of ourselves, that just has a ripple effect across our entire life.
Thank you so much, Nicole. And if I can come to you, Bhavana, the same thing, if you have any thoughts and want to share some of the challenges to mental health and well-being of carers from your work and your perspective, that would be great.
I want to share a personal story. Although I started Caregiver Saathi more as an endeavor to honor the memory of my dad, who had a terminal illness, and my mom, who was the primary caregiver, and the fact that I saw my role as that of the caregiver to the caregiver. Yeah. For a very long time, I saw myself as, if I can take care of my mom, she will do what is required, and that's my role. It was only many years later that, on account of some other circumstances, my mom turned around and said, "Don't you see yourself as a caregiver?" And I was struck about how I had been talking about caregivers not self-identifying as caregivers, and me doing exactly the same. So I think it is hard. First, you will be surprised to know there is no equivalent word in any Indian language for the word caregiver. Right? Very often you will find people reference what they do under care work as something that is their familial duty. I'm a good daughter, I'm a good wife, I'm a good mother, I'm a good husband. This is a part of my role, my relationship, and therefore I do this. I'm not a caregiver. So I think the starting point is for you to be able to see yourself as separate from the various roles that you play, one of which is that of a caregiver. And because we don't see them separate, it becomes a little hard to, it's just your identity. If it is your identity, it will be difficult to take help for it. It will be difficult to say, I'm running out of steam. This is not something I can do because, this is just who I am. So that's one part. And the second, of course, is there is a huge gender element. Women are expected to, and therefore they are better care providers, carers, or caregivers. And that has a role to play in how we see ourselves and the way that we conduct this responsibility. The third element that I'd like to point out is that, caregivers, it is inherent that you are a giver, and that it becomes hard over a period of time to receive. Although everybody says you have to be able to receive in order to be able to give, and so on and so forth. But the predominant personality becomes that of somebody who does for others and does not necessarily receive. So I'm going to pause there with those three thoughts.
Thank you so much to both of you and sharing some of the challenges carers face for their own mental health and well-being. Even in our work also, many carers feel guilty about looking after themselves and asking some help or something. So how can we do when there is a need for care within our house, so someone we love dearly? They find it took them a while before they expressing their difficulty, challenges that they are facing themselves. We have thousands and thousands of such stories in India, Nepal, and Bangladesh. If I can stay with you, Bhavana, and taking on those 3 points you so eloquently shared, why is it then self-care is so important for carers? You talked about the challenges, now why that self-care is so important for carers.
So remember the last point that I mentioned?
Yeah.
Because I'm not going to take it from someone else, who's going to do it for me? Who's going to replenish me? It will need to be me.
Yeah.
And there can be sometimes circumstances and situations that only I understand what I need at that point in time. So I think because carers or caregivers are so mindful of what is needed by people around them, it can sometimes become a very low priority to think about what do I need. And one can feel guilty about articulating that I need this, or sometimes feel that, it's just not going to be available to me. So therefore, it becomes really important to constantly stay with the question, what do I need? And we need sources that replenish us. Fundamentally, we need love, care, affection, time. We are human. We need a sense of connection. We need somebody to just see us. I love that line from the film Avatar, in which the way you say hello is to say, I see you. And I think because caregiving is so invisible, the fundamental need for all caregivers or carers is to be seen. And we will let others see us only if we can see ourselves.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, Bhavana. Nicole, why self-care is so important?
Yes, building on Bhavana, that was so beautiful. Thank you for sharing it in that manner. And to build on that, my journey of self-care has been also one of self-empowerment. So at the very beginning of my journey, when I had hit the wall and ended up in emergency, and I realized I needed to make a change, the first thing I did was ask my then husband, Mike, for help. And it sounds so silly. Well, of course, you need help. You just ask your partner. And I'm like, but no, as you said, we're so used to giving and taking care of others. It's hard to then receive. But I said, I need you to help me go to the gym. And his response was, well, if you want to go to the gym, go to the gym. I'm like, no, you don't understand. And again, because my kids were young, I carried the guilt. I can't work all day and then go to the gym at night. I have to wait till they go to bed. So it would be at night. It was dark, winter in Canada. It's like -20. Who wants to leave the house? But by actually asking for his support and doing it in a loving manner, he could say, oh, remember you wanted to try to go to the gym 3 times a week. And that is at its simplest form, but that took a lot of courage. And so what that showed me is that helped me find my voice. It helped me say all that love, compassion, and advocacy that you do for your daughter, try it on yourself. And so I see self-care as a form of advocacy. And so little by little, I, built that muscle of starting with 3 times a week to now I practice self-care daily with no shame or guilt. I actually really embrace it. And then that allows me to show up as a better version of myself in other areas and speak up and ask for help in ways that I wouldn't have been able to before. So self-care, we focus it, we think it's just one thing, but it's a ripple. It's a rock we throw in the water, and it just has such a positive ripple effect across, I think, our entire life, because as we know, caregiving, as you said, is a role, and we have different roles. And the more we can honor ourselves, I think that's one of the beautiful gifts of self-care. It's an act of self-love.
Thank you so much, Nicole. I love that word. Self-care is an advocacy, a form of advocacy. You are absolutely right. At Carers Worldwide, one of the things we've done is we promote a group for carers to come together. So there are more than 700 such groups are operating. Every month they come and meet and talk about their own issues, challenges, and difficulties. That is the first thing they do, is to get out of their house and the routine and meet with other carers in similar situation. No one is judging them. So when they're talking and sharing about their issue, challenges, so that support network and all. And before starting group meeting, they sing or make prayers and all. So that is kind of like recharging their batteries and energizing and helping them to cope with the challenges and difficulties. And these groups have come together and formed their own association. Like earlier, Bhavana was talking about, most of the carers are invisible. So created these platforms. Now we have 15 of such platforms. These are for carers, of carers, by the carers. These are registered organizations. Now, not just making caring visible, but also they are advocating for their rights, advocating for this respite and the short breaks, which will help them to improve their own mental health and well-being, and inculcating those self-care in their daily routine practices as well. So thank you so much. Are there any practical tips? Both of you want to give some 3 or 4 practical tips? What can carers do? Even though carers don't have the time, in spite of their busy schedule, are there simple tips you would like to share with your experiences? What is it they can do during the day?
Okay, I'll go
After you,
first.
Nicole.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Okay,
Sorry.
thank you.
Yeah, Nicole, you can go ahead first.
Thank you. So I call these are my top 3 self-care tips that caregivers can carry in their back pocket. And this means you can do them wherever you are, if you're traveling, if you're home, if you can't leave the bedside of someone for whom you're caring. So again, it's removing the barriers. So the first one is breathing, taking deep breaths. And this is overlooked, the power and the ability to calm your nervous system and to reduce your heart rate. And one thing I use, or the example, it's called box breathing. So you breathe in for 4 seconds, you hold your breath for 4 seconds, and then you breathe out for 4 seconds. And depending on how you're feeling, you can choose how often you repeat it. And the better you get at it, you can increase the number to 5, 6, 7. The other tip I have is hugging. So if you're caring for a loved one, that means you have someone to touch and to hold. And research is coming out about the impact of hugging and how we all need that form of connection. But again, how our body is able to relax when we hug another person, our blood pressure and our heart rate drops. And again, it is that connection with another person. And then the third is a mantra. And so I know when my daughter I say behavior that I don't understand or get very upset, I will tell myself, it's not her fault, it's not her fault, it's not her fault. And that is very soothing for me, because in that split second, when I feel myself get upset, that's what I say before I react. And that is the key. Doesn't always work, but if we can say something, and the other mantra is, I love you, I love you, I love you. And it's just enough to, change the path of that wire so that I return to a place of love for my daughter. So those are my top 3 tips: deep breaths, hugging, and personal mantras. Bhavana, over to you.
Thank you, Nicole.
All right. So I love your tips, Nicole. I'm a big hugger myself, so I totally vote for that one. I may forget to breathe, but I totally will hug. Sometimes I have to remind myself to take permission. But yes. So what are the 3 things that I would recommend that are everyday tips? I think it is absolutely, I would totally remind all of us who have caring responsibilities to remember that a part of us is a child, and we must keep our hobbies and creative pursuits alive, whatever they may be. Whether it is singing, whether it is dancing, whether it is painting, whether it is cooking, whether it is whatever my creative expression. And I don't have to be the performer. I don't have to be, somebody who's achieved a certain, it's a hobby. And I think sometimes as adults, we forget our hobbies. So that's certainly something that I'd recommend. The second thing that I'd recommend, and is linked to breathing, but over a period of time, just like we build our muscles for self-care, we build breathing. I do think that finding a place for calm or meditation. Now, you could have any form of meditation. My form of meditation is crocheting or motorcycle riding, depending on what mood I'm in. But find your form of meditation, a place where you find your calm. Yeah. And the third thing is ask yourself this question: what do I need right now? It isn't something that we have learned to answer as we have grown up. And it is something that gets refined over practice and over a period of time. But if we keep asking ourselves this question, we will zero in on what do I really need at this point? And of course, once I know what I need, I can ask for it.
thank you so much to both of you for those wonderful practical tips. Simple. One need to make sure that whichever is culturally appropriate. So please feel free to promote some of those tips to the participants who are joined today's webinar. I know I haven't got much time. Just I want to dwell a little bit on the one more question. This is like a call to action. What needs to happen? Why should mental health well-being be everybody's business? Nicole, would you like to go first, please?
Yes, it's twofold in the sense that we're all responsible for our own wellness. However, we're also responsible for helping others who may not be further along on their path. And so we all benefit when everyone's healthier. And I just think as a society, we are only now learning to talk about this, to acknowledge everything that happens in our lives, and that caregiving is challenging, caregiving is stressful. That's our baseline. And for the longest time, we haven't said that. Like the very first time someone said caregiving is hard, I was like, oh, but it's what I do. It's my daughter. I can't say it's hard raising my daughter. And then I was gentle with myself. And so I think it's everyone's business, because we need to change, I think globally, how we look at success. And we need to redefine. So success is, being able to find inner peace on a daily basis. Success is actually allowing ourselves and giving our permission to say, what do I need? This is all linked to discussions around mental health. It's not about all of the tangible things that we can check off on a list. How does one measure inner peace? But yet that is such an amazing success to attain. And so I think it's just the more discussions, the safer, and that's another part of it, is people will feel safer sharing how they feel. And we then will realize that there are so many more caregivers. The statistics are overwhelming in Canada. It's saying there's 1 in 5 people. And I always say, I'll go to look around at work and thinking, oh my goodness, there must be tons of caregivers and no one's talking about it. And then if you can't talk about it, you can't express how you feel, and you can't share, and you can't heal and move on and grow. So that's why I feel so, or why I believe that this is everybody's business, because ultimately, we're all individuals, but we're all one and we're all connected. So, yes,
thank you.
I'll leave it at that.
Thanks, Nicole and Bhavana. Why it should be everybody's business, and what are your call to action?
Okay, so one of my favorite stories is that about legendary anthropologist Margaret Mead, who was once asked this question, what according to you is the first sign of civilization? And the person asking this question would have perhaps expected an answer like organized living, farming, tools, etc. But you know what Margaret Mead said? She said, to me, the first sign of civilization is a healed femur bone. What that means is that in the animal kingdom, if someone were to break their femur bone, it would be sure shot death. But if you found a healed femur bone, that means that someone bothered to take the wounded, take care of them, and let them heal. So caring for another being is the first sign of civilization. And that is why caring for caregivers who help us heal is linked with civilization, with humanity. And that's the first reason. The second, I strongly believe that compassion is a teachable skill. Compassion can be a teachable skill. However, it cannot be taught in a classroom. It needs to be taught through life experience, through working with the vulnerable, those who do not have a voice of their own, to be with people that you can relate with them and speak for them. So that's the second reason. And I'm tempted to take this comment from Sudhindra about linking it with the SDGs. So here goes. Universal healthcare means overall healthcare, not just the absence of infirmity or disease. So if there is wholesome care, then mental health and caring for the caregivers becomes important. Second, for years, there has been gender disparity, and women and girls worldwide are held back from further education, employment, and financial independence because they are expected to provide unpaid care work. In India, it is as high as 3.26 billion hours daily. So if we want gender equity, we need to rebalance the amount of care work that men and women do. And this rebalancing can come only if we recognize care-related work. And lastly, the number one SDG is no poverty. Some statistics here: in India, 55 million people go below the poverty line every year on account of healthcare expenses. And that's because caregiving is not a prestigious career. It deprives people of money. So caring for caregivers is linked with our sustainable development goals. I can go on and on.
Yeah. No, thank you. Thank you so much. We have the opportunity for question and answer. You can address some of those things as well. I just want to wrap up this fireside chat. Thank you so much to Nicole and Bhavana for such an inspiring and very enriching discussion. Why mental health is so important, mental health and well-being is so important, what are the challenges we dwell, and what are the simple practical self-care tips. Thank you so much. And also call to action. So now, as Chris has already introduced Roksana, barefoot. She is a carer herself and undergone a training to become a barefoot counselor. And she herself is caring for a teenage son. Over to you, Chris. Thank you so much.
So I think we're leading directly into the video now.
Yeah, that'd be good if you would. Yeah, that'd be very helpful.
Center for Disability and Development, CDD Bangladesh, working with the carers worldwide since 2018. So we are implementing carers model in Savar, in sub-district of Dhaka. Counseling support over phone and sometimes face-to-face. Roksana providing in the community to other carers. Carers is the frontline resource in the community, and they are providing their support to their loved one, and their loved ones are becoming active members of the community. So carers change, it's day by day. So now I would like to introduce Roksana Apa. Please, Roksana.
আমার নাম রোকসানা, আমি একজন কেয়ারার। আমার একটা প্রতিবন্ধী বাচ্চা আছে, আমি তার দেখাশোনা করি। আগে হয়তো বা আমার এই পরিচয়টা ছিল না, সিডিডির মাধ্যম থেকে আমার এই পরিচয়টা পাওয়া। তো আমার এই পরিচয়টা পেয়ে আমি অনেক হ্যাপি। আমি অন্যান্য কেয়ারারদের সাথে ফোনে কথা বলি, আর আমি তাদের সাথে কথা বলতে পারে মানে এত ভালো লাগে যে আমার কষ্টটা আমি ভুলে যাই, যে মানুষের ভিতরে এত কষ্ট থাকতে পারে। প্রতিটা ফ্যামিলিতেই যাদের এরকম বাচ্চা আছে, আসলে তাদের কষ্ট বোঝার কেউ নেই বা শোনারও কেউ নেই। তো আমি যখন থেকে কাউন্সিলিংটা শুরু করি, তারা আমাকে মানে এত সাপোর্ট দেয় যে তাদের মনে যত ধরনের কষ্ট আছে আমার সাথে শেয়ার করে, আমার কাছে খুবই ভালো লাগে। আমি যখন তাদের সাথে কথা বলি, তখন তারা তাদের কষ্টগুলো আমার কাছে শেয়ার করে, তখন আমি মনে করি যে তাদের হয়তো মানসিক যে পরিবর্তনটা, আমি ওইটা বুঝতে পারি যে ওরা অনেক মানসিক পরিবর্তন হয়েছে। এবং মানসিক পরিবর্তনের সাথে সাথে একটা ফ্যামিলিতে তো যে কেয়ারার সে তো সবচেয়ে প্রধান, মানে তার সব দিক দিয়েই তার কাজকর্ম করতে হয় বা সব দিকে দেখতে হয়। সে যখন মানসিকভাবে সুস্থ থাকতেছে, মানসিকভাবে সুস্থ থাকার ফলে দেখা যায় যে তার যে পারিবারিক আরো কাজকর্ম বা পারিবারিক সবার যে দায়িত্বগুলো সে সঠিকভাবে পালন করতে পারতেছে। জীবনের সবচেয়ে পরিবর্তন যে আমি আগে বুঝতাম না যে আমি কি করতে পারি আর কি করতে পারি না, এখন আমি বুঝতেছি যে না আসলে আমি অনেক কিছু করি, যেমন একটা বাচ্চার দেখাশোনা করি, পুরো ফ্যামিলিটার দেখাশোনা করি, প্লাস আমি আমার সংসারের উন্নতির জন্যও কিছু করি। এই সাথে সাথে আমার মতো আরো 50 জন বা 100 জন মায়েদের সাথে কথা বলে তাদের ফ্যামিলিটাকেও সুন্দরভাবে করার জন্য তাদেরকে উৎসাহ দেই, বা তাদের উন্নতির জন্যও আমি তাদেরকে উৎসাহ দিতে পারি। এই কাউন্সিলিং করার মাধ্যমে আমার যে মানসিক পরিবর্তনটা হচ্ছে, যেটা মানে আমি নিজে উপলব্ধি করতে পারতেছি যে আগে যেরকম আমি সব সময় উদ্বিগ্ন থাকতাম, এখন আমার এই কাউন্সিলিংটা করার মাধ্যমে আমি অনেকটাই সহজ হয়ে গেছি। আমি এটা গুরুত্বপূর্ণ মনে করি কারণ আমি দেখেছি যখন আমি ফোনে তাদের সাথে কাউন্সিলিং করি বা আমাদের যখন মাসিক যে একটা মিটিং হয় তখন যখন আমি তাদের সাথে কথা বলি, কাউন্সিলিং করি অথবা সরাসরি তাদের সামনে গিয়ে কথা বলি, তখন তাদের দেখে আমি অনেক খুশি হই যে আগে তারা যখন কথা বলতো তাদের মুখ থেকে একটা হাসিও বেরাইতো না, এখন কিন্তু তারা হাসতেছে এবং তাদের যে মনের সব দুঃখ কষ্ট আমার সাথে শেয়ার করতেছে এবং তাদের মানসিক অনেকটাই পরিবর্তন আমি বুঝতেছি।
Well, that was brilliant. Thank you very much. I'm delighted to say that Roksana Appa is on the call with us as a participant, and so I just wanted to welcome her in particular and thank you very much indeed for the film, which we very much appreciate. Thank you very much indeed. Just before we get to our questions, I just wanted to let you know that something like 54% of the poll that we did earlier were unpaid carers. 68% were working with carers. And there were a couple of nice tips that came through from the crowd who are on the line now. The first self-care tip was seek peer support. And then the other was find a way to do deep breathing exercises. So there we are, two very helpful practical tips which came to us. Now we have a little time for questions, and I wanted to invite Manoj, if you would be able to come on and give us your question, please. Can we highlight Manoj, please, Michelle? That would be great. And Manoj, if you are not feeling too timid, it would be nice to have your question. Can you find him, Michelle? Have you found him?
Yes. Thank you so much.
Welcome, Manoj.
Thank you for this wonderful, such an enriching and exciting word of advice, word of experiences being shared by the guests here. And I just want to, I have a question here. You know, one of the times I've realized being a caregiver is the frustration that gets developed sometimes is that I'm not able to articulate my expectation to the receiver. How do I tell them? And do I have one expectation from them in the first place? How do I tell them? There is this whole guilt feeling that no, I cannot tell them. I should not have any expectations from them. So if there is any advice that you would have for caregivers around this.
That's a great question, Manoj. Thank you very much indeed. I don't know why you're so bright and ask all the good questions always, but anyway, it's great that you do. Nicole, do you want to jump in first, and then I'll ask Bhavana to come in?
Bhavana actually raised her hand, so I think I'll pass it to her first.
All right, that's fine, Nicole. Bhavana, over to you. Thank you very much, Nicole. Bhavana, over to you.
Thank you for first articulating that question, Manoj, because I think it can be very hard to articulate. One, that I have expectations. Two, that it can be frustrating because, there's taboo around both these ideas. So I'm glad that this is a safe space for you to ask this question. The next thing that I'd like to say is I'd like to give you a little example from my parents as what I saw. Like I told you, my mom was the primary caregiver. Yeah. And my dad was a pilot in the Air Force, but he had a neurological condition, which meant that he was homebound and was steadily deteriorating. My mom was a school teacher and used to go to school every morning. And every morning, my dad would give her a safety pin to tie her sari. Yeah, every morning. And one of the things that I realized many years later, that in so many ways, he was her caregiver. And what I'd like for you to explore is our definition of who the caregiver is. Is it really the person who's providing physical care? Or is it an exchange between the two? And if it is an exchange between the two, then it's a relationship. And there can be an exchange of expectations, love, energy. And we are caregivers to each other. It isn't from one to the other.
Nice. So there's a kind of reciprocity there, which you're talking about. Yes.
Yes.
Amelia, you had a question earlier. I know that it was partially answered in the chat, but you might like to just talk about it to us a little bit. And then after that, we'll come to another question.
Hello, thank you. This is my first time attending one of these, and I just have to say it's absolutely fantastic, not only to hear from such amazing people, but to hear that some of the challenges we experience in our different places can all be really quite similar. So my job role really within the NHS healthcare provider that I'm part of is to support our staff to work better with the carers and the families of our service users and patients. And as such, one of the biggest challenges is first identifying who our carers actually are, and then supporting those carers to understand what we mean by the word carer or caregiver, or however you want to phrase it, because a lot of people then say, well, actually, I'm their family member. Of course I do this. This is kind of what you were saying before. So I guess that's the big question really, is how do we get our healthcare professionals better equipped at identifying carers in the first place? Thank you.
That's a great question. Thank you, Amelia, very much indeed. And you're most welcome. And we hope you'll join further webinars, not just this one. Nicole, do you want to jump in?
Well, healthcare providers is such a huge umbrella. And I think this is part of the I say gap in the system when we look at the training of any healthcare providers, because it's really, from my own personal experience, everything's like, okay, you got 15 minutes, you go in, the doctor, whomever comes in with their questions, and then you're out. So it's how do we, anyone who's going in feel safe? My daughter was diagnosed with a intellectual disability at 1 year old. However, so many of our appointments were rushed. There was so much wasn't seen. At 6, when I said, I'd like to have her tested for autism, the child, like the pediatrician said, oh, do you think she's autistic? And I'm still like dumbfounded with that question, because I thought, oh my goodness, people are so overworked. So to get to your question of how do we, I believe it starts at the education, as in like the university, the programming, or when they're in there with the pamphlets, and just, assessing, for parent caregivers, I assume it's pretty easy. If your child has a diagnosis, has a rare genetic disease, then they're, oh, okay, this means that this parent is a caregiver. However, if you're working with, for aging population, then it's really educating those people, or educating, helping them ask the right questions. So when someone comes in, oh, are you caring for your, I see that you accompany your mom to every appointment. How often are you doing this? Is she able to do X, Y, Z on her own? And so I think it's, what does her home life look like? And so these are much more abstract, but and I appreciate the challenges. Everyone is different. But I do believe that there are some core questions that people can start asking, and thoughtfulness that can go into how we approach. So we're not just focused on the patient. And I think that's how caregivers feel so invisible. Even at the beginning of my journey, everyone always asked how Summer was. No one asked how Jordan was. Jordan feels invisible, but no one asked how I was doing. It's how Summer. Has she learned to walk yet? Can she feed herself? And so that's a very long answer to your question of how can, organizations be better prepared to equip the caregiver.
Bhavana, come in.
Yes, I'd like to build on what Nicole said. And Amelia, one of the things that I think we can do is build in our language. So I think the fact is that let's just baseline that everyone is a caregiver one way or the other. Yeah. It's just that we provide different types of care and we are at different points vis-a-vis the person who needs care. Yeah. So the way to say it is that anyone who provides physical, mental, emotional, social, or financial care is a caregiver. And that'll pretty much include the 8 billion people on this planet and maybe some animals as well. Yeah. Now, having said that, I think the question to answer is, what type of care do you provide? What type of a caregiver are you? So I'm the one who helps with the daily living activities, or I'm the one who provides the money. Am I a long distance caregiver? I worry about this person. So long as I worry about this person, I'm a caregiver. And I think healthcare practitioners are really influential and they can help build this vocabulary.
Thank you very much indeed, Bhavana. And I must say, I think the questions have been very rich today, and the interpretations of the questions by our two panelists have been equally rich. So I really appreciate that. Sarah, you were online a bit earlier with a question, and I wondered whether you would just like to round out the question a little bit as our last question today. Sarah, you, for your sins, are one of our trustees. And so it seems nice to be able to bring you in at this point.
Thank you. And all of these questions are so interlinked. In my question in the chat, I said that there'd been a lot of focus on the carers themselves and taking responsibility for their mental health, and that's absolutely true. But I guess it also links into Amelia's comment, and I'm just thinking about who's advocating for the mental health of carers, and because there often is such a hesitancy to recognise oneself as a carer and recognise that one's mental health might be affected.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. I see, Vinashri, you have your hand up there. Did you want to ask a question?
No, Chris. I just wanted to make few comments on Amelia's question. So to introduce, I am a part of Carers Worldwide India. I am part of Carers Worldwide family, and I am a psychiatric social worker, a mental health professional from India. So as a response for Amelia's question, in addition to whatever Nicole and Bhavana have beautifully spelled out, a few additional thoughts is the very question of asking, we being healthcare professionals or professionals from a diverse setting working for carers, if we ask them, how are you? That itself will give them a strong sense of feel. There is someone asking about me beyond the affected person. That's one thing. And in addition to that, other questions like how have you been able to find time for yourself? How are you able to manage your life with all these responsibility? Because when we talk about well-being, it's not just about mental health and well-being. It's not just one area which is affected. It's the overall life. It's the holistic well-being is affected. It could be work, it could be finance, family life, physical health, spiritual health, overall well-being is affected. That is where that realization will come.
Thank you, Vinashri.
For a quick tip I would like to give is one thing: listen to
Yeah.
them, allow them to talk. That's the powerful tool, and validate their emotion, because there's often a question: why me? Why this happened to me? Why this happened to my family? So validate
Yes.
their emotion, normalize their emotions, because guilt, as Nicole initially mentioned about how the guilt is essential component. So validate their emotions, normalize, and when I again take back Nicole's word of having a mantra, it's okay can be a mantra. It's okay to feel angry. It's okay to feel sad. It's okay to feel irritated. Just express your emotions, find a buddy for yourself, and get the appropriate authentic information, because what after me is a main question which every carer will have. After me, who is there? So yeah, for
Vinashri,
this,
it's okay for me to say thank you to you for your input, and I want you to join our next webinar, which is coming up in a month or so. The next webinar is on the rights of carers, and since you have already made a major contribution to this webinar, I would like you to join the next one as well. Keep an eye out for that. You're very welcome as part of the family of carers worldwide. We're coming to an end now of the session, and I want to thank first of all Nicole and Bhavana and Roksana. Thank you very much indeed for all of your comments and presentations, the thoughtfulness and care with which you've given the answers and the response. I want to thank our founder Anil for joining with us again today and posing these incredibly searching questions, which I think have been really helpful and fruitful and have given us all a lot to think about. A couple of takeaways: looking after ourselves seems to be just such an important feature, and to not feel guilty about it seems to be very important. The validation process that Vanishri has also just been talking about, very important. Self-care as an instrument of empowerment seems to me to be very important. I love the idea of quote unquote, I see you. And that seemed to me to be a very important feature. Compassion is a teachable skill. That seemed to me to be both self-evident and something that we don't understand often. And so therefore very much worth bringing out. And so I think those were just some of the kind of ideas and ideas which came across to me. And I thought outstandingly, both our speakers today online, Bhavana and Nicole, and Roksana, who was mostly on film, but she happened to be with us online as well, Roksana Appa. It seemed to me that it was really important to understand the way in which you have dealt with our webinar today. Your compassion has really shone like a light on us, and we do appreciate that very much. I want to bring this webinar to a close with warm thanks to you all, and very much appreciate the participation that you have given us as participants and the questions you've asked us. And thank you all very much for attending today. All the best. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thank you, Anil. Thanks, Rob.
Great pleasure. Take care.